Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How are you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. Today's episode is presented by Golf Dojo, your space, your time, your game. Bring your game to Golf Dojo, Western New York's best indoor golf experience with 2 locations. Visit mygolfdojo.com. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Patrick Moran. A big thank you, as always, to everybody out there for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I do appreciate you all very, very much. This is our weekly Podbag episode. This is the episode where you, the audience, control the narrative, control the topics, your questions, your comments, your takes featured on the show today. I will be responding to them, as I say every week. If you want to have your comment, question, take featured on the show, several ways you could do that. Make sure you are following Talking Buffalo on our YouTube channel. Simply go to the video version of one of our episodes, leave a question, comment, take on YouTube, and if it's good, I will pull it and use it on the following show. You could also tweet at me at Patrick Moran TV, or of course, you can email me directly at talkingbuffalopodcast@gmail.com. Kind of got used to doing these over the last couple months now, and quite frankly, I enjoy it. It feels interactive to me. I like hearing from all of you, and I kind of like responding to all of you. I do it as much as I can on Twitter, but you're kind of limited with characters. And sometimes when you write something out, context can get a little bit taken away from you. So I really am comfortable, and I like doing this style of podcast when we can, which for now, anyway, like I said, will be once a week. Real quick, funny little, well, at least I think it's funny anyway, a little anecdote before we dive into this week's Podbag, which, of course, as you would suspect, is dominated by Buffalo Bills content. Anyway, I was on Facebook earlier today, and I went through memories, the memories that come up there. And I got to be honest with you, man, I'm kind of like lukewarm about going through the memories. And on one hand, I kind of like going back 5, 8, 10, as far as 15 years back, and kind of seeing where I was at in life, like what was going on, what was I talking about. Quite often, some fun stuff, some really cool photos, some thoughts, some takes, things like that. So on one hand, it could be really cool. On the other hand, sometimes going back 5, 10, 15 years or whatever can kind of trigger bad memories. You know, you might be going through a bad time in your life, or you see a comment from a friend who may have passed away or something like that. And it can kind of trigger a lot of sad stuff too. So I kind of go back and forth. Like I'll go on my timeline and look back at my memories on that date, a handful of days, and then I might stay away from it for a while. I guess it depends on what kind of mood I'm in that day and at that time. But anyway, I went through my timeline today, and I went back 12 years ago on this date. I actually got to pull this status up. I'm going to put it up on the video side. For the audio side, I'll read it. This is kind of old takes exposed, Patrick Moran Facebook style, because this turned out to be one of the absolute dumbest takes I've had sports-wise in my life. And I have been chock full of really dumb sports, and more specifically, Buffalo Bills takes. But you know what? We're having fun here. I'll call myself out. I'm going to throw this up there and read it. 12 years ago on this date, I said on my Facebook to my friends, I've covered the Bills for a few years. I blogged about them, sort of, for the past 5 or 6 years, and I've grown up watching them every season. I don't know how 2012 will pan out, but this is by far, to me, the most athletic Bills squad I've seen in at least 15 years, maybe even all the way back to their early days of AFC dominance during their team's Super Bowl era. Not saying it will automatically translate to more wins, but this team is absurdly athletic. That was me on Facebook to everybody out there who could see it 12 years ago. Let me give an update 12 years later. It definitely did not translate into more wins. And I went just to refresh my memory. I had to go back on Pro Football Reference and look up the Bills roster and lineup from 2012. And CJ Spiller, absolutely. I said absurdly athletic. I mean, CJ Spiller was a great athlete. But aside from that, I mean, they had CJ, Stevie Johnson, TJ Graham, Scott Chandler, who, to be fair, was a pretty athletic tight end for somebody of his size. By the way, Zach Davison kind of has a little bit of some Scott Chandler in him. But anyway, I digress. Mario Williams, Nigel Bradham, Aaron Williams, Stephon Gilmore, Jarius Byrd. Those were some of the more athletic dudes on this team. But yeah, as far as translating into wins, no. The Bills went 6-10 that year. That was the end of the Ryan Fitzpatrick era, I believe. And I think the team drafted EJ Manuel the next year, which, of course, did not get better. But anyway, I don't know. I just got a real hoot out of going back on my Facebook memories and seeing that. And just a lot of, maybe that's part of the reason why I stay away from Facebook memories, is because I look at some of my old takes going in, because I'm a guy who likes to make predictions. I'm not shy when it comes to making predictions. And sometimes when you do that, you open yourself up for idiotic takes like that. But anyway, all right. On that note, I want to dive into this week's pod bag. I'm going to start with this one. And I want to say this too. This is regarding Joe Marino from Locked On Bills. I had him on my show last Wednesday night, live from Sunny Reds. A great show. If you did not see that or listen to it, make sure you go back and check that out. That was outstanding. Anyway, no lie, no exaggeration here. Probably just on YouTube alone, got no less than 20 to maybe even 30 comments about Joe Marino, overwhelmingly positive. I could sit here and I could read all those off, but I would be taking up probably 2/3 of the time that I have for this episode just on what you guys think about Joe Marino alone. So I don't have time. I can't go there. But what I will do is pick one that I selected because I thought many of them were really good. But this one really, I think, represents what you think, a lot of you think, and what I personally think Joe Marino is as well. This is from @JasonSuggs3543. And he says this. He goes, Joe is the man, a terrific voice for Bills fans to listen to, that's not filtered by the team or local media. Joe is clearly hardworking, informed, sincere, passionate, and has an extremely bright football IQ mindset. We all love hearing Joe's insight into the team, current and future. Go Bills. Thank you for that, Jason. And I'll tell you this, you could not be more spot on. If you follow the Buffalo Bills and you are into the podcasting realm, which obviously if you are listening or watching this show, that means that clearly you are. I'm going to assume that Locked On Bills is part of your rotation, maybe even that first stop on your rotation. And if it's not part of your rotation and you don't know who I'm even talking about right now, trust me when I tell you, if you're a Bills fan, you are missing out big time. I think you encapsulated perfectly what I think and what a lot of people think about Joe Marino. He is hardworking. He is informed. He is sincere. He is passionate. He does have an extremely bright football IQ mindset. Agree with all that. And I would also add this too. He is very appreciative of the people who take time from their day. He values other people's time. He knows how important it is. So when you take time from your day to listen or watch Locked On Bills with Joe Marino, it does not go unnoticed by Joe. I promise you that. I know that. I feel the same way too. People's biggest asset, their most valuable asset is their time. And when you're giving up time to watch somebody else or listen to somebody else, it means the world to them. Certainly does to Joe. Look, this isn't a hobby for Joe either. He does it literally for a living. I got to tell you too, real quick here, man. And I think I'm going to say this. This is no slight against literally anybody else. There's so many talented people, so many great forms of Buffalo Bills content out there. But for my money, I think Joe Marino is absolutely the best in this market. He is the best in the game. He is consistent. He's on every day. No other, this podcast is every day as well, but I don't always do Bill stuff. I do Sabre stuff. I do plenty of other things. Joe Marino is just straight up Buffalo Bills 5 days a week. Nobody else does that. And certainly if they do, not on his level. His shows are consistent. They get to the point. He talks about the team, even though he's a Bills fan and he doesn't run from that. We talked about that on the show last week. Very objectively, he is not afraid to pull the trigger and be critical on this team or the players or the coaches or management when it is warranted. And my anecdote here before we move on, and I got to say this. I talked about it a little bit on the show, but I really hope that I can say this in a way that you'll appreciate and understand. So when we did that show last week, we went on the air at 8:00 and we met at Sunny Reds at 6:00. Typically, when I have somebody on a show that I do live or on location, I meet up with them roughly an hour or so before the show. Usually we get some food, some wings or whatever, eat, shoot the shit, catch up a little bit, and kind of go over what the podcast is going to be about. Well, Joe wanted to be there at 6:00, which honestly, I that's 2 full hours before. I thought that was like kind of borderline silly. He's like, talk to some fans and stuff. And I'm like, all right, whatever, So I get there earlier than normal. And I usually get there before the guests, but Joe's already there. And he was literally holding court with fans. And I was absolutely, I'm still right now, over a week later, kind of almost shocked at how many Buffalo Bills fans came to Sunny Reds last week. As much as I would like to think it's for me, one for the show. Hell, in this case, wasn't even for the elite outstanding wings and service at Sunny Reds. None of that. They were there literally for Joe Marino. It was insane. There had to be 30, 40 people minimum who came there purely because they wanted to meet Joe Marino. Go up to him, introduce themselves, talk about the team, the fan that they are of Joe, in a couple cases actually give him a couple gifts, take some photos. Dude was like literally a celebrity. It was wild. And I've had plenty of bigger name people on the show. I've had some former Buffalo Bills who are very popular players, Steve Johnson, Eric Wood, John Fina. They've all been on the show. Lots of mainstream media people that are very popular out there. Sal Capaccio, Tim Graham, Matt Perino, so many very popular and well-known mainstream media people. I am telling you, and this is not hyperbole whatsoever, this was by far the biggest crowd that I've ever seen for one of the guests on my show and the most engaging crowd that I've ever seen. And Joe appreciated it all. He had 1.5 wings because he didn't even get to his wings, which were sitting there for a good 45 minutes. They came out 45 minutes before the show. He banged out like 1.5 wings, and then bam, it was 8:00 because he spent all the time that he had, all the allotted time having conversations with people who came out to see him. I'm just saying, it was really wild. So yeah, I think he's the best in the game right now. And thank you for that comment again, Jason. All right, let's get to a actual Buffalo Bills comment here. This is from @YangWing1A22. Training camp is pretty much over now, at least the public viewing portion of it. There's been a lot of positive stories to focus on, which is great. But I'd like to know what or who has most disappointed you with camp. Thanks for that, gang. That is a good question. I have seen 2, and I will see the last 2 practices in person. Besides that, like many of you, I have relied on video clips. I have relied on reading from a lot of the content creators, mainstream media people out there that I trust most to really keep up and be engaged with what's going on at Bill's camp. I am part of a content creator group that somebody has been at practice every single day, tweeting out thoughts, tweeting out videos, firsthand experience, stuff like that. And like I said, I've been there a couple times as well myself. Not a lot to be disappointed about from what I've read, what I've seen, and what I've seen firsthand. I, for the most part, have been impressed with almost everything that I've seen from Bill's camp. But if I were to say that, I'm not a Bills homer, but that would make me feel like one because the team's not perfect. They're far from it. And there's been a couple things, at least, that have disappointed me. I would say the thing that's disappointed me most with Bill's camp isn't the performance of a player or a position. It because of performance. I would say the injuries to the safety position, more specifically to Mike Edwards and then Nicole Bishop, almost in back-to-back days. That was shaping up to be quite the battle, I think, to see who was going to be the starter alongside Damar Hamlin. A nice 3-horse race to see who starts alongside Taylor Rapp. And injuries have kind of ruined that. And going into camp, safety was a concern, a big question. This has been a football team that since 2017, for the most part, has been set in stone at safety with 2 of the very best in the game. We've been spoiled for years between Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Towards the back end of their careers, the level of their play certainly slowed down some, but still relatively solid. And you might not have gotten the flash and the pizzazz that you would get the big plays as often from those guys, but you knew they were solid out there, and you knew that you could feel pretty good about the safety position. Even as recent as 2023, you kind of knew what you were going to get. Well, going into camp, lots of question marks before anything happened. Taylor Rapp did not start last year, a starter. He finished really, really strong last year. That Miami game, he was a monster. Back-to-back plays to really put a seal on the game for the Bills and win then the AFC East. And then he missed the playoffs because he got hurt on that game-winning diving interception of Tua. But anyway, previous to that, you really didn't see much from Taylor Rapp during the season. More of a role player, not very impressive. But he goes into camp and he's the starter. So I think it's at least fair to have some question marks about him. Then on the other side, Mike Edwards, he's won a Super Bowl with 2 different teams. Did some really good things with the Chiefs. Wasn't a starter though, but started down the stretch after injury. And, he's a starter for the playoffs, for the Super Bowl run. But still, you still got some questions about him. Plus, he missed pretty much most of, or if not all, offseason activities because he had a shoulder issue. So he goes to camp. You got a question about him. And then Cole Bishop, a second-round rookie, very talented. But is he going to play strong safety? Is he going to play free safety? Is it just going to be a positionless position for the Bills? Is he going to be good enough to get up to speed? How quick can he get up to speed? Is he a starter? And within a matter of days, you lose Edwards to the hamstring and Bishop to a shoulder injury, and they're both out for weeks. So that's been very disappointing because Saturday you have a preseason game and the season is a handful of weeks away now, and I'm not feeling great about Damar Hamlin being the starter. And that's not necessarily a knock against Damar Hamlin. I think he could be okay. He could be adequate, but that doesn't excite me. A starting safety combination of Damar Hamlin, Taylor Rapp doesn't, quite frankly, do a lot for me. And who knows when Edwards and Bishop will be bad. I noted on the show yesterday, I know it's a hamstring and it could change quickly, but from what I saw yesterday, I was watching Mike Edwards walk around. He still looked like he was walking around pretty slow and pretty gingerly on that hamstring, on that leg. So I wouldn't bet money that you're going to see him back anytime in the next couple weeks. And again, you're getting to the point where the season's going to start. Mike Edwards has had very, very little work, on-field work at least anyway, with the Bills since signing, and Cole Bishop's a rookie. So I'm concerned about that position, and I'm disappointed that we didn't get to see the battle during training camp for all intents and purposes is going to be over tomorrow. And we never really, the battle at safety never really materialized. So that's disappointing for me. Also, I expected a little bit more than what I've seen so far from MVS. I'm not out on MVS. Every year there's a storyline or a player that either looks great in camp or he looks shitty in camp, and you have a strong opinion about him one way or the other. And as it turns out, when the games actually matter, it doesn't mean shit. Maybe that might be the case with MVS. Like, they're slow playing him being here right now, or he's just slowly getting comfortable working into the offense a little bit more and more here and there. But I haven't seen what I was hoping to see from him out of camp. I thought he would have really good chemistry with Josh Allen right away and be one of those guys who made a lot of splash plays at camp. Have not seen that with him. Again, he's a veteran. You know what he is. He's going to drop some passes. He's going to make some plays. And if he's on your team, he's going to step up in the playoffs. If he's on the team, because he's got no special teams value. So how they plan on using him in the offense, how much, probably determines if he makes his team. But a little disappointed. I haven't seen more from him. Casey Toohill, an early signing in free agency. He's done nothing. That's been a little bit disappointing. I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not overly worried at all, but a little bit disappointed because I was hoping that Matt Milano, I'd see a little more vintage Matt Milano by this point. I know that they're ramping him up slowly and by design, as they should. You know what the hell he is. He's an all-pro linebacker. You don't need to be rushing his ass into anything, but still a little bit disappointing, or at least a little worrisome that Matt Milano was still, I get a little Trey White and Von Miller syndrome. When those guys came back from major injuries that first year, they looked like shells of their former selves. So I'd be lying to you if I sat there and told you that, it isn't at least crept into my mind a little bit. So sure, those are some of the things that concern me right now, or I should say that disappoint me, to your point, with Bills camp. Quick break, come back, plenty more Buffalo Bills and a couple other things as well right after this break. All right, we are back on the Podbag. This is the episode where you control the weekly narrative. By the way, shout out if you're watching us on the video side, I'll put up there the camera. Really sweet Buffalo Play-Doh style design, but it says Buffalo on it. It's from 26 Shirts. I always like buying stuff when I can from 26 Shirts because it always helps support a very worthy cause. But anyway, pretty cool coffee mug. All right, at Pro Bills V1. Yay, finally preseason game on Saturday. Who are you going to be locked in most on? Good question. As of right now, I will say this. Ray Davis would probably be my answer right now. I thought, and I could have easily mentioned him actually in things that I've been a little bit disappointed about, if I'm being honest with you, at Bill's camp so far. I thought he would pop a little more than he has. And he hasn't. So yeah, I want to see when the bullets are real, and he is running between tackles, which is going to be a strength of his game, where opponent is trying to hit you hard. I want to see exactly where he's going to be in terms of that. I forgot to turn my phone off real quick there as that was going off. But anyway, I want to see what Ray Davis does when the bullets are real, man. How he looks between the tackles, catching a ball out of the backfield, maybe making somebody miss or running someone over. I haven't seen a lot of that at camp. Ty Johnson has been down with a hamstring. I think Ray Davis, if he looks good in the preseason, has a real chance to kind of take a stranglehold of that RB2 job behind James Cook. And who the hell knows with James Cook, man? As good as this guy is, and he was fourth in the NFL in rushing last year, he makes mistakes. He had a couple, one real notable drop that I saw at camp, wide open. He just dropped the ball. I could see McDermott or Joe Brady getting pissed off at him if he makes a mistake, and it might open up the door for Ray Davis. But I haven't seen a lot from Ray Davis. But he's the kind of running back where I don't think you're going to see too much from him in training camp during a practice where the hitting and contact is a lot more minimal. So he's a guy. There's others, but I would say Ray Davis is the guy that I'm most looking forward to seeing. Stan says, what is a position for the Bills that people aren't talking about much at camp, but you're feeling really good about? I don't know if it's tough to say because, and thank you for that, Stan. A position that's not being talked about much as a whole. Ed Oliver gets talked about every day because he looks great at camp all the time, as he always does throughout his career. He's always been a great camp player. But the defensive tackle position is a grouping that I feel a lot better about now than I did a year ago. You obviously have Ed Oliver, who, again, very established player, uh, at his best, a Pro Bowl caliber player. At his worst, which unfortunately the last couple of years has been in the playoffs, disappears for stretches. He does it during the regular season too at times. But I feel like you kind of know what you got with Ed Oliver, and there's still a chance that he might even be ascending a little bit. He's a good player. He can be a great player. At times he is a great player. You know what you got in him, and you know what you got in DaQuan Jones as well. So DaQuan Jones, who you want to talk about someone who's had a quiet camp, and I'm sure, again, that's by design, an older veteran who's getting plenty of rest and not a lot of reps, which is perfectly fine. But Ed Oliver, DaQuan Jones, if they both stay healthy, that is a rock solid starting group. And it was last year too. But I like Austin Johnson. I think he's good. I think he's somebody, again, who's been quiet in camp right now, but when it ramps up, I think as a situational role player who won't see a ton of snaps, I think he's going to do some good things. And I really like Dwayne Carter. You know, we don't even talk about Dwayne Carter. It's all about Coleman and Bishop with this draft. Maybe even some of the guys, the sleepers in the later rounds. But Dwayne Carter looks very promising to me. I think he's going to have again, rotationally speaking, a role on this team and do some good things right away as a rookie. The Bills don't agree with that, and they want to bring him around real slowly. I don't know if Deshaun Williams is even going to make this team, but if he does, I think he's pretty capable as well. So as a unit, I think the defensive tackle position between Johnson and Carter and Williams behind Oliver and DaQuan Jones, so much better to me than Jordan Phillips, who couldn't stay on the field and, was just often a liability. If he wasn't into the quarterback, Jordan Phillips was a liability. Tim Settle, 2 years in Buffalo. I really liked him. I wanted him to work out. He didn't. Just didn't do much. Naval Joseph got off the couch last year during the season and tried to help the Buffalo Bills, and it just it didn't work. And Poona Ford, ditto. Just didn't do anything for the Bills last year. That position had names last year, but let's just be honest, they got garbage behind the starters. This year, I feel much better about it, the depth of that position. So I'll say defensive tackle. That's going to be a spot where I think I'm going to feel really good about, even if we're not talking about it much right now. At Neil Joseph, 5918, Keon's basketball skills are a huge asset to the way he plays. Going up in contested space and come down with the ball translates very well to his style. He seems like a winner. I'll say this. He's impressed me regularly at camp. Impressive size, impressive ball skills, impressive hands, impressive catch radius. But you got to see it when it matters. Got to see it when it matters in real games. It's easy. Not to say it's easy. It's never easy to play in the NFL, but it's easier to be comfortable and look comfortable and look the part in camp because the bullets at the end of the day, some contact and there's contested, it's not like Elam and Benford and Douglas aren't trying to stop him from catching the football. It's just a different level, man. When the games matter, that's when it really matters. I'm not going to get too high on somebody as a rookie. I'll just leave it at that. At Kent Carmack, continuing with at Kent Carmack 5879, continuing on another Keon Coleman point here. As far as Coleman goals, I originally thought he might get 40 targets. Now I wouldn't be surprised at 60. I think the health of the unit is going to matter. How much Matt Collins plays is going to matter. And I know Matt Collins did nothing with Atlanta last year offensively, but 2 years ago with the Raiders, this guy was almost a 700-yard receiver. They like him a lot. I think Collins actually has a little bit of an edge right now early on when it comes to Keon Coleman, like the top three receivers. I think it's Shakir, Samuel, those two for sure. And I think in 3 receiver sets, and it'll be interchangeable. But I think Matt Collins is going to get a lot more early on, at least anyway, of those 3 wide receiver reps. It's kind of funny when you look at Keon Coleman. I'll add this too. He was just not a guy that people talked about in Buffalo anyway, I'm talking about here. We didn't really spend a lot of time talking about Keon Coleman because it just didn't feel like he was going to be the type of receiver that the Bills wanted. It felt like it was going to be a Xavier Worthy, or felt like it was going to be a Lad McConkey or Wilson from Michigan, one of those types of players. And that's if they weren't going to go get a Brian Thomas or go nuts and try to get all the way up the board for a Dunze. So it just didn't spend a lot of time on Coleman. Wasn't a burner. But now in hindsight, it just feels, watching him at practice on the field, watching him, of course, be a character off the field, a great character, a very fun character. It's been fun to watch him. It just seems like Keon Coleman and the Bills feels to me like a match kind of made in heaven. We'll see how it plays out on the field because, again, he's got to prove himself. But Keon Coleman and the Bills, to me, feels like a perfect match on the field, off the field, within the community, within Bills Mafia, all that stuff. It just feels really good. But anyway, you said originally thought he might get 40 targets, wouldn't be surprised if he got 60. Well, I mean, 60 would be what, a little about 3.5 per game? I can see him getting 60 for sure, because he's probably going to go through some stretches. Maybe not early in the season, but I guarantee by like midpoint of the season, he's going to be one of the go-to pieces on this offense. At Garth Ham's 9. Do you think the Bills end up extending anyone before the regular season starts? I'd really like to see them get something done with Groot. By the way, just such a physical specimen, man. You see him on TV, and if you haven't had a chance to see him up close in person, he's an impressive dude, man. So I was at camp. I was like in the VIP tent area right up against the rail in the field on Monday, and he was signing for some kids, and I was maybe 5 feet away from him, and I was like, holy shit, man, this is a big dude. He has dominated camp. The question is, can he stay healthy? Can he put it all together? If he puts it all together, I've called Groot a high floor, but I need to see a little bit of a higher ceiling. I don't know how high his ceiling is, but he's certainly got a high floor. But the Bills would be wise. Brandon Beane would be wise to lock him up right now. Von Miller is near the end. AJ Epinesa is solid, but you kind of know what AJ Epinesa is at this point. I feel like Groot can still become he's been a good, very good, but not a great defensive end in this league. He's got that ability in him. Be proactive. Get him done. Spencer Brown would certainly make sense. He's one more good season away from getting a massive deal, whether it's from Buffalo or somewhere else. So if you're Brandon Beane and you know that you want Spencer Brown in your future, I'd get it done now. You might be able to get him in at a little bit of a better price than if he goes out and he plays. If he has the same season he did last year, he'll be one of those guys like Tremaine Edmonds a couple years ago, where you're like, well, we could pay him this much. He'll go willing to go up the hair. Then he goes to Chicago, Tremaine, and has a contract that just blows you out of the water. Kind of feel like that could be the same case with Spencer Brown next year if you don't get it done. I wouldn't be stunned to see Rasul Douglas get a maybe a 1-year extension to his contract. Wouldn't count on that, but it wouldn't stun me either as well. A couple more here, and then we'll get out. At Sean Kula, 11B says, talk about Zach Davison. Even if Zach Davison somehow made the team, he wouldn't contribute at all minus a serious injury to Kincaid or Knox. You know what, Sean? That's a fair point. I talked about it a little bit on the show yesterday. What is Zach Davison's path on the field minus injuries? When's he getting on the field? You got Dalton Kincaid, your first round pick. You got Dawson Knox, a guy who is making a shitload of money, and a guy who could block, and a guy that Josh Allen trusts. So Zach Davidson has been incredibly impressive at camp. I was very impressed with him yesterday. Man, was I impressed with him yesterday. But this is why you can't make the jump on Zach Davidson. Even if he looks good in the preseason, I don't think you can make the jump on making it a formality that Zach Davidson makes this team over Quinn and Morris. Because I've said it yesterday, I'll say it again. The problem with Zach Davidson, if he's your TE3, he brings zero special teams value. Zero. So now you have a scenario where if you had Kincaid, Knox, Zach Davison, you got 3 tight ends who are basically not playing special teams. How does that work? I don't think that could work. Quinn and Morris, is a core special teams player on a team that lost Saron Neal, that lost Tyler Matekovich last year. And with the new kickoff rules, special teams probably is going to matter more. So I don't know how, if it's even in the ballpark of being close, that Zach Davidson makes this team over Quinton Morris, unless you keep 4 tight ends. If you keep 4 tight ends, that means that's one less wide receiver, or that's one less defensive back or linebacker or lineman. And it's one less body at another position you're keeping because you keep in 4 tight ends. And to your original point, Sean, as good as Zach Davidson of a story he is, what use is he if he's not getting on the field? I don't think the Bills are going to run a lot of 3 tight end formations where they're throwing the football. Now, if Dawson Knox goes down, or God forbid, Dalton Kincaid goes down for a stretch and you got a Zach Davidson, bam, he can really pick you up in the passing game. I think he's got a lot of ability in the passing game. But his path to playing and getting on the field, I just don't see it right now on this football team with Dawson Knox on the team, minus injuries. At Mazvids, let's not forget, Douglas wasn't restructured, meaning he's all but gone after the season. Elam is one minor injury away from being the starter at either side, and if his development continues, he'll be the starter by next season at the latest. Sounds reasonable. I think Kyrie Elam has looked really good at camp. The difference from what I've seen between this year and last year is he's been more consistent this time around. Last year, he would look like an all-pro on Monday, and then he would look like a scrub on Tuesday. And I'm sorry, but that's what it was. I mean, he would make mistake after mistake, 2, 3, 4 defensive holding penalties in a 15-minute stretch. Sean McDermott would be screaming at him and get yanked off the field. I've seen him multiple times with my own eyes last year. Very up and down, very inconsistent. Couldn't trust him whatsoever. I feel like that's why he barely saw the field last year, unless he had to with this team. This year, he looks a lot more confident. He's ascending at the right time. At camp on Monday, he actually got first team reps with an 11-on-11 before Christian Benford did. Now, I don't know if we got a quote unquote starting battle brewing between Benford and Elam, but that's certainly a good sign for Kyer. He's looked good. But like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if Douglas ended up getting a deal done. I think the Bills like him a lot. They trust him. He is a really good corner. And it's not like he's washed up and over the hill. It's not like you got Josh Norman out there starting for the Bills. So I wouldn't rule out Douglas coming back. But you could also look at it. You got Benford, you got Elam. And if you really like Elam, you're like, all right, man, I could be set next year with 2 Bills corners on rookie contracts. We'll see. Darren says, who's a player who's having a quiet camp that no one's talking about that is going to be a factor when things start to matter? I mentioned him earlier. I'll go with Austin Johnson. He hasn't really done anything at camp, but when the lights come on, I think he's going to be a really, I don't say really good, but certainly a pretty good backup rotational defensive tackle. At Allen Stein 132, is Von Miller really looking a lot better? Yeah, man. Dude, Allen is night and day. He's got bend. He's got quickness and some explosion in small space. Wasn't even close to having that last year. Maybe the Chiefs game. I don't think you're going to know for sure until Arizona in week 1, because I can't see Von Miller getting more than a tiny full, if any, reps during the preseason. If I'm Bobby Babich, I'm not playing. Von Miller's not seeing a snap during the preseason. And I know some people might disagree with that. You want him getting game shape, getting a little game action. It's Von Miller, dude. He's been in the league forever. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He knows what he's got to do. He knows what he needs to ramp up. And if he's there physically, I don't need to see it during the preseason whatsoever. But anyway, to your point, night and day, dude. Looks completely different. Last 2 here. At Aura Jeffrey, the chances the Sabres make the playoffs are way, way higher than the Bills making the AFC Championship. I think Joe Yurden is being too pessimistic about our squad this year. I think we compete for second in the division. Thanks for that, Jeffrey. So I had Joe Yurden on last week at Imperial, and we were talking about pressure between the Bills and the Sabres. Who has more? And that led to a conversation of me asking Joe, what's more likely, the Sabres finally making the playoffs or the Bills getting to an AFC Championship game? Ultimately, Joe went with the Bills making the AFC Championship game, which I don't know, man. I wanted to say I agree with him, But then I'm like, the math says no. That sounds dumb math wise, but the Bills are a very good football team, and the Sabres, at least till now, have been a very bad hockey team. Anyway, second place in the division, though, man, dude, that is really optimistic. You know the Sabres are in the same division with, right? I don't know, man. Last one here. I like this too. Brian Oliver, did you acknowledge your original tribal chief at SummerSlam? Dude, you bet your ass I acknowledged my original tribal chief at SummerSlam. All right, I am a lifelong wrestling fan. I do not hide from this. Quite proud of it, actually. I've went through some phases as an adult where wrestling just became background noise to me. I'd watch it once in a blue moon, keep up with it a little here and there, but I wasn't invested, certainly not emotionally invested in wrestling. And for all you idiots and jerk offs out there who just want to make fun of wrestling and say that it's fake, no shit, it's fake, man. Do you like The Sopranos? Do you like Game of Thrones? Like Sons of Anarchy? It's TV. All right. It's entertainment, scripted or not, storylines. It's all the same, man. It's entertainment and it's fun. It's athletic. And I'm just a fan. And I'll never, ever, ever, ever run from that. But anyway, wrestling is back on a huge uptick. Since Triple H took over, WWE has been as good as it is now as it's been in the last 15 years. And over the last couple of years, I become a big, big, big Roman Reigns fan. I've always liked the heels, even when I was a kid. Nowadays as an adult, everybody likes the heels because they're not even really heels anymore. It's kind of like shades of gray. There's no more black and white. It's shades of gray. When I was a kid, it was no shades of gray. You were either a baby face or you were a heel. And even when I was a kid, which made me weird, I rooted for the bad guys, man. I always liked the bad guys in wrestling. But anyway, I acknowledge my tribal chief. I've been doing it for years. I knew he was coming back at SummerSlam. They didn't announce it, but everybody, if you follow wrestling, you knew he was going to make an appearance. I quite literally planned my Saturday around it. I went out with my buddy Mike, man. We went to Hoffer House. We went to Resurgence. I'm like, yo, we got to get back. Got to get back. SummerSlam's coming on. Well, there were other things I wanted to see in the show. But anyway, you knew he was coming out and it didn't disappoint. The roof came off Cleveland. Well, they didn't have a roof, but if they did, it would have popped out from Cleveland when Roman Reigns came out. That shit was fucking awesome. Awesome. And I can't wait to see how that story plays out. But anyway, all right, on that note, that's going to do it for this episode. I do thank you again very, very much, as always, for watching and for listening. I'll be back. I'm going to have PK from the Buffalo Sports Collective. He's going to be on with me tomorrow's show. Again, I plan on being at Bill's camp, so I'm sure I'll have plenty of observations. Then for Friday's show, I am definitely going to be at Bill's camp on Thursday. That is the last actual training camp practice at St. John's Fisher. I will be there, and I'm going to have Anthony Marino on, and we will go over plenty of that on Friday. So for now, thank you very much, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.